literature review. I pay respects to Larrakia elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that First Nations people have been able to preserve their community and the environment over thousands of years. Respect. Hi, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Josh. I work in the library. I'm a language and learning advisor. I've been asked by Jan to come here and give a talk today about literature reviews. This is just an advice session, basically. So let's have a look at an overview of literature reviews, some of the steps involved, the kinds of lit review that you can write, some common challenges that people face, some strategies for writing lit reviews, and then I'll plug you into some useful tools and help, and we can have a discussion if you like. So in the beginning, I want you to think about what makes a good literature review. If you want to really participate in this video session, scan that QR code in the corner and type in what you think makes a good lit review. I'll give you a few seconds for that. We have a full lit review page on our study skills. If you scan this code, you can go and see two kinds of lit review, one that's designed for undergraduate people and one that's designed for postgraduates. Whichever one of those suits you best, I encourage you to look at that. And much of my material from this talk is based on our study skills. But essentially, a good literature review has a look at the big picture and the context. It identifies some gap in the literature. It shows the people who are reading your document that you understand the topic. It justifies and sort of provides a rationale for your work. It considers other people's research. It is informed by some kind of methodology or theory, and it establishes your own credibility as an author and the credibility of whatever document you're writing. The people do them in different ways, but I've got a nice 10-point system or a sort of 10-step system. I think you should prepare keywords in the beginning and then search for your sources, go through some sort of process where you select them, then reference them, then set up some kind of recording table so that you can make notes, read and make extensive notes on your sources, identify key themes, plan out how you're going to write your lit review, write it up, draft it up, and then edit it and revise it. So let's just go through these 10 steps one by one. It's important in the beginning to prepare your keywords, I think. So you analyze the topic that you are searching for carefully, and you identify words that a search engine is going to use to find better sources or more relevant sources. So let's say you're trying to solve this problem or, do this task, discuss the impact of social media on academic performance among university students. Within that, there are action words, content words, and scope words. So action words are what you need to do, content words are the basic topic, and the scope words are the limitations or the ends of the field that you want to search for. Now, each one of those words, if you just type that string into a search engine, you might get some good results, but it's good to consider that, especially with the content words, that each one of them has multiple synonyms. So you might not find any sources using the word impact, but if you choose synonyms for the word impact, like effects, influence, or consequence, you might have different results. Same with that word, multiple synonyms, etc. So consider alternative synonyms for your search terms and try different combinations when you're searching. Where should you search? I think a good place to start is at the library. So think of all of the good databases in your field and in your subject. The library pretty much has accumulated and collected them into your study guides and referencing guides. And I think for undergraduates and early postgraduates, you go to the library homepage and that search bar, that's pretty much all you'll need. It will include databases and it will include searches that you'll find elsewhere, like in Google Scholar, etc. When you're finding your sources, you should look for a mix between influential, historically sort of seminal, important sources, ones that your supervisors suggest. We want to look for peer-reviewed, highly cited articles. That should be the sort of brunt of your collection of sources, but don't forget about books or other people's theses, conference papers. They seem to come out a bit quicker than journal articles, etc. And yeah, try to get a wide selection of sources, but the predominant one, the main one, should be peer-reviewed, highly cited articles published in international journals. That would be the ideal. When you're searching, there's a way to use special Boolean terms to either widen or limit your search. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. When you're selecting your sources, like I said, the library page has got a useful section on this. It'll show you how to evaluate sources and the kind of guides that you can use, etc. I encourage you to go and have a look at that. But essentially, when you've got a source, you've read the title and you've read the abstract, you want to do some kind of internal evaluation. You want to do this yourself. So a trap method's the good method for this. You think about the timeliness of the article, like how old it is. You think about how relevant it is to your topic. You think about how much authority the author and the publication have. You think about how accurate or sort of current or right the information is, and you think about the reason why the person wrote that article. If there's money involved, for example, if they're trying to sell something, then we don't trust it as much. If it's a peer-reviewed international journal that's highly cited, then the purpose is probably something more wholesome, like to provide information or to educate. So when you're considering your sources for selection, run it through some kind of evaluation metric. I like the trap, but there's other ones, and assess the quality of your sources before you select them. First thing I do once I've decided I'm using a source in my lit review is to provide a reference for it. If you, I think the referencing style that you're using is APA 7, but if not, you can go to the library, subject guides, referencing guides, and just sort of find your style. And you can also use tools like EndNote or Zotero to compile your sources and have them in a sort of a program that will do the referencing and the citation for you. But yeah, first thing I do is reference my sources once I get them, and I do it in the form of a table. So you can set up an Excel spreadsheet and put the reference in one box, and then make a bunch of other columns. For example, you might have a column for a summary of what the source found. You might have a column for the kind of study it was, etc. So if you want a ready-made table or a ready-made matrix, you can scan this QR code there. The library provides one for you. But yeah, do this in the beginning. Once you've selected your sources and you're preparing to read them and extract information from them, have some receptacle to record all of that data. Don't just make notes by highlighting sources or writing notes on paper or whatever. Have an organized system. So column things that you can look for in a source, or column titles could be things like, what kind of methodology did they use? How can I critique this article? When and where does it agree with other articles, etc.? Does it disagree with other articles, etc.? Or any themes that you might predict in that. So yeah, use that spreadsheet if you like. There's two options here, a spreadsheet or a matrix. You can use either of those. And when you're reading, just go through methodically, one by one, and critically read your sources and make notes. So for example, I get my first source, I make a reference for it in the APA 7 format. I make a comment on the kind of methodology that source used. I make a comment on the main conclusions or main findings from that source. I critique it if I can. I find some sort of weakness or something that I think could be improved in it. I find where that source might connect with other articles. And yeah, once you go through and fill in all of those boxes, then it's just rinse and repeat. However many sources you've chosen, just go through and populate that table, and then you've got a really good resource to go through and be able to write your literature review from that. One piece of advice that I would say when you are recording your notes is to not copy paste or not use Gen AI to do any of this for you, to do the writing yourself, so that anything you put in those boxes, it's your words, your language, and you can use it with confidence in your writing later on without worrying if it's going to be flagged up for plagiarism. So yeah, don't copy paste when you're filling this table out. Once you've gone through and read all of your sources, usually what a lit review will do is will start to identify common or main themes, places where the articles agree with each other, places where the articles disagree with each other, or places where they use different methodology or use similar methodology, etc. So go through and sort of with a big picture look, have a look at the notes that you've taken and start to draw connections between them. This article disagrees with that one, this one, and these three all agree with each other, kind of thing. In terms of planning out your writing, you shouldn't start to write before you've made a decent plan. And that's what it'll look like for a lit review, something like that. You'll have an introduction to your lit review, a conclusion, and some kind of body. So if I had to put a percentage on it, I know that for this task, your lit review is not going to be very long. It's going to be less than 1,000 words, I guess. So maybe 100 words for the introduction, 100 words for the conclusion, and then 70 or 80% of the word count for the lit review is dedicated to the body. And it's up to you how you sort of structure or organize that body. I think I'm missing a slide there. Yeah, and then you write up the first draft. So following that structure, you write it up, and don't judge yourself too harshly on the first version of it, because the first version of anything is not really that good. You just want to get a basic draft, so then you can go forward and start revising it and editing it. And you can do revision and editing with someone else. You can book an appointment with someone like me and get some strategies and tips. You can use Gen AI to critique your writing and give you suggestions. You can use a friend or a colleague or your lecturer. But yeah, it's you sort of get your draft going in the beginning and then start showing it to people to make sure that it is as short as it can be, that it is as analytical as it can be, that it's as accurate as it can be, that it sort of flows from one idea to the other, and that all of the parts kind of agree or fit together as a whole. So those are my 10 steps. I think, I guess, if you're watching this video, you're sort of somewhere near the beginning, you're preparing keywords and sort of deciding how you're going to search. Some of the common challenges that students have when they're preparing for or doing a literature review are, I'll get to those in a minute, sorry. There's a few kinds of lit reviews. The one that you're doing is called a narrative review. So you get to select your own sources and sort of put them together how you like. When you start doing longer literature reviews, they get increasingly more challenging. But at the moment, you're doing an easy one. You just start with an overview. You summarize key themes. You identify and summarize key themes in order to set up your paper. The way that a journal does it is very formulaic. It's kind of like that. You introduce the problem, you set the context, have a look at some past research, identify a gap, and then introduce your research in your paper. But yours doesn't need to be that formulaic. I think let's just keep it simple at this stage. It's going to have 3 parts: introduction, body, and conclusion. Body's going to be the biggest, and it's up to you how you structure that body. Now, there's different ways to do a body. Some people organize their parts or their paragraphs or their chapters by location. Some people organize it by time. You start with the older ones first and go to the newer ones at the bottom. Some people do it by theme. Some people organize it by the different kinds of methodologies that are used. It's up to you, but I think a good starting point would be for you to, while you're reading and taking notes on your sources, to identify some main themes and then sort of separate your chapters or your paragraphs out into one theme, one nice neat theme per paragraph, and get the sources to talk to each other within that. If you would like to do a little activity to look at different kinds of lit review structures and try to guess which one is which, you can scan that code and go ahead. But I'll move forward. The challenges I was talking about are students have problems finding relevant sources, and so they might not understand the difference between a high quality, reputable academic source and a piece of grey literature, for example. Another problem is that students find it overwhelming. Now, in your case, I don't think we'll get too much into that, because the kind of literature review that you're doing in your paper as a group it's quite short. Like I said, less than 1,000 words. So I'm guessing 10 sources, 15 sources. Of course, double check with your literature, with your lecturer, but I'm guessing 10, 15 sources should be fine. The students have trouble sort of differentiating between summarizing work and synthesizing work, and the answer for this one basically is you want to synthesize it. You don't just want to make summaries of 10 or 15 sources. You should summarize the 10 or 15 sources that you've considered, but then make them talk to each other, sort of analyze and compare and contrast them with each other, sort of make them interact in some way. Another challenge that students get is trying to keep it into a clear structure. In your case, I don't think it's too much of a challenge, because it's quite short, and I recommend you organize it thematically. There's also some problems with making citations and referencing, but I'll get to those in the end. The main thing I want to impress on you is that a literature review is not just a list. It's not like a shopping list, like a list of summaries. You don't just say, this guy said this, and this girl said that, and then, you don't just sequentially go through and be like, yep, I've talked about it. What we want to do is we want to take a study and summarize it, but then compare it to another study that said something different, and then find a group of studies that all say one thing. You want to compare, contrast, and sort of make the sources interact with each other, and make them show how they agree and disagree with each other. Now, when we're searching, like I said, you've got options for the kinds of sources that you want. Some lecturers permit you to use grey literature, like popular, newspapers, blogs, YouTube videos, etc. If you're doing some kind of trade-based study, you might use manuals or news or sort of organizations that are related to your major or to your field. But the one that I think you should focus on most is scholarly articles, books, journals, the things written by international organizations within your field, etc. Peer-reviewed, high-quality, sort of verifiable literature. There's a bunch of places to search. Here are some options. A regular Google search, I would advise against that. If you are going to use Google, jump up to the next level and use Google Scholar. I think the library search is pretty much all that you will need at this stage. But if you want to do a deeper dive, have an appointment with an academic and research librarian and learn how to use a database. But please note, when you do a general search in the library, on the library page, it does use some of these databases as well. So yeah, I think that one's all you really need for now. If you're going to do an advanced Google search, make sure that you refine it as much as possible by adding keywords or words that you want to exclude. You might choose to add sites or domains that you're looking for. For example, if you type gov or edu, you'll get government documents or university documents and sort of raise the level of quality. In Google Scholar, there's a nice setup for you to search by date range. So if I click this button here in Google Scholar, it'll only give me sources from the last year. It also helps you make a reference or a citation. You can save it for later. And we want texts that are downloadable with a full text. It's better if you can have a downloadable text, a PDF version. From the library, make sure that you select that it's available online. You can choose by source type, so you can choose to get only journal articles or books or a combination of those. You can also set your date range, and it's really useful because you know that you'll be able to access it in full text format, and you can get it'll do your referencing for you, and you can also save it. Another cool thing about the library search is that you can send it straight to EndNote if you're using that. Now with the advanced search, that's when you're using these Boolean operators, so words like and or. If you want to know more about that, you'll be booking an appointment with an academic and research librarian to show you how to use those appropriately. But yeah, when you're searching for sources, save them as you go, sort of have a system. Maybe you don't want to jump in and use EndNote or Zotero straight away. Maybe you have a different system. Maybe you bookmark them or you write them down on paper or something, but have a system so that you can save them as you go. If you click this little pin button here, it will save it into your library folder. And if you click this EndNote button here, it will export it to your EndNote, which is like a referencing software. So I'm not an expert in EndNote. If you want to become an advanced user, book an appointment with an academic and research librarian. But essentially, it's a referencing tool that helps you store and manage your resources, and it'll make your citations and references for you. So it looks something like that. Every time you find a paper that you like, you can import it into EndNote. It'll keep it in a sort of list for you, and you can export the reference. It'll make an in-text citation for you. It's just a way of sort of keeping track of your resources in a nice, neat place. So if you want it, you can go to this referencing box on our library website, or just click that link there and download those. We also have support for using those. You can download it as an app onto your computer, or there are even web-based versions for it. There's a full guide available on the library, and if that's not enough, if that's not the way that you learn, then book an appointment with one of our librarians, academic and research librarians. They would love to help you set it up and walk you through how to use it. Even if we are using a piece of referencing software, I highly recommend that you learn the basic elements for a reference, because sometimes the machine will make a reference for us and we just use it, but unless we know what a good reference looks like, it's not possible to sort of double check and verify whether it's okay. So the main references for an APA 7 source, the things that are important that you should remember, is author, date, article title, publisher, publication, that's like the magazine or the journal name, and the place that you got it, which is usually a URL or a DOI. Those 5 elements are basically what comprises an APA 7 reference. So we've got the author, surname and initial, the date, the article title, the publisher or the publication in italics, and then the place that it that it got retrieved from. So if you're using referencing software and it produces a reference and it kind of doesn't look like that, then you might need to go and double check it. Now, this is just a general composition for most sources. If it's a book, it's a little bit different. If it's a book, the title of the book is italics and the publisher is not. But for most sources, for most soft copy digital sources these days, that's the format. And I remember it like this. Don't forget to have hanging indentation. So the second and subsequent lines of each one of your reference entries are indented by one tab. And I remember it by making a little mnemonic, SID, surname, initial date, article title, publication place. So yeah, I hope that helps you. We have a nice referencing guide on the library website. You can do a deep dive on APA if you want more help with that. But this exportable PDF is pretty much all you need. It's the quick guide. It will show you how to do in-text citations with one or more authors, and it will show you how to do what the format looks like for each of the kinds of references. So yeah, you can just scan that code there and download that little PDF. I think that's all you'll need for now. Another thing that I think might help you is a browser extensions. So if you don't use Mendeley and you don't use EndNote or Zotero, you might just want to do a quick reference by installing and enabling some of these browser extensions. And that means no matter what website you're ever on, you just click that little button and it'll produce something which is pretty good. In this case, I can see there's no indentation, but it is pretty good. It's got surname, initial, date, article title, publication in italics, and the place that it was found. So it looks pretty good on paper to me, except it doesn't have the indentation. My favorite browser extensions are BibGuru. I start with that one and it will do most of them. But if I can't get a good one with that, then I'll go down the list to Citation Hero, MyBib, and Cite This For Me. But yeah, that's a neat little hack if you like to do quick referencing. Some other strategies for writing that I'll just cover quickly, I think, is this idea that we're not just listing a bunch of articles and what they say in our lit review. We're trying to combine it together and to see how they relate with each other. So an example of that would be, let's say a very simple example. I've got 3 sources. I go through, I read them, and I decide that I want to use this sentence here, so I highlight it. I want to use that sentence there, so I highlight it, and I want to use that one there. So I've gone through and I've kind of read my sources and highlighted them. And then during that process, I've found that the first source mentions causes for whatever the issue is, and so does the second source and third source. Now, what I've done there is just identified a theme. So one of the chapters or one of the paragraphs in my lit review will now be causes. And you can do that for any other sort of ways that the sources relate to each other. This is a very simple example: causes, effects, and solutions of plagiarism. But you might find, more themes might emerge while you're sort of reading through these sources. So once you've identified those themes, then you go back to your table, your matrix or your table, and put them in there. And this sort of helps you to inform your writing. So let's say I'm doing a literature review. One of the paragraphs is causes, one's effects, and one's solutions, depending on the themes. Now I go through and I try to find where they relate to each other. So in this case, I can see that the first source talks about pressure, and so does the third source. So I can say Ma and Lu and Yan and Pan agree on those things. I also noticed that the first source and the third source disagree about the way to deal with this problem, and I can mention that as well. And that's important, So when we're synthesizing sources, we're not just saying what they talk about. We are trying to, like the green part of this lit review are showing where the sources agree with each other, and the red parts are showing where the articles that I've read disagree with each other. So an example of that, we won't do it now, but if you want to pause the video and read these two and try to guess which one you think is better, I'll give you a second to do that. All right, so the one on the right is better. The one on the left doesn't really synthesize the sources. It just says, this source said that, this source said that, this source summarized, this source overview. You know, it doesn't really analyze them or critique them or compare them with each other. It's just kind of a shopping list sort of lit review. But this one comes out and it really, well, it makes them talk to each other. It says that Westgarth, Corneliuson, and O'Sullivan all say this. And then it says, on the other hand, this one disagrees with that. And it says, these people have the same view as those people, but a limitation of that study is, etc. Like the person who wrote this is critically engaging with the sources. It's not just, they're not just summarizing them, they are comparing them and contrasting them to other sources in the field, and they're also highlighting limitations in the study, or the limitations that they can see. So we want to critically evaluate our literature, pretty much. We don't just want to report on it. We want to make them talk to each other and sort of see how they relate to each other in the wash. So when you're looking at ways to critique an article or find limitations in the article, there's three ways to do it. You can do it from the article itself, you can critique the research, or you can critique the text. So let's say I find a source and I run it through my internal trap evaluation, and I find that the source is 20 years old. Great. I mean, I can still use it. I can still use that article, but now I've got something to critique it for. I can be like, this is an old source. Yeah. Or I might find that the purpose of the article was to promote a product or to sell a product. Okay, I can still use it, but it's nice to then be able to say the weakness of this source is that there is some kind of financial motivation involved with it. So that's one way that we can critique an article from one of these trap framework elements. Another way that we can critique an article or a study is by the kind of research that they did. So for example, perhaps they used a small sample. Perhaps they used a methodology that was not appropriate. Perhaps it was too small. Perhaps they did it too quickly. Perhaps it happened only in one part of the world. Perhaps they used data collection tools which were faulty or critique worthy. So that's the second way that we can kind of come at an article and try to critique it or offer up a limitation for it. And the third way is text-based. You can find things that are wrong in the text. You could find arguments that are not well supported. You could find that they don't really engage with the topic well. You could identify some kind of bias in the writing. So yeah, that's the third way that we could critique a text. Three ways basically. From the cover page, you can critique the article based on trap. You can come at it from a research critique, or you can read the text and identify weaknesses in the text. If you're looking for a good paragraph example or a part of a lit review, then this one would be appropriate, I think. So it starts out, identifies a gap in a research, and sort of clearly says the topic. So the topic of this is dogs are attacking people, right? Then it will introduce some research. So for example, Westgarth said this, most dog attacks occur in this area. But it doesn't just finish there. Then it goes on and says, however, these other people, these other authors, they said that, but they said it in a different way. Then it might highlight some weaknesses or limitations to the source. So it's, a limitation of this study is that, methodologically, it only examined people who've reported dog attacks when most dog attacks are unreported. So we've identified a weakness or a limitation with a source. In this one, it's also contrasted and found where, my picture's obscuring it here, but sort of shown where one source has disagreed with another one, and then has some kind of review or linking statement. So that's a good example of, elements that can be included in the paragraphs of your literature review. Don't just summarize a bunch of articles. Summarize them, compare and contrast them, try to find weaknesses with them, show how they differ from other people's research, and then kind of link it all back to the main thesis of your lit review. So an activity, pause the video, take a couple of minutes. These 6 elements here, these 6 sentences, these 6 sentences, match them up. Which one goes where? Pause the video, match those up. All right. So yeah, this introducing the gap is this sort of introductory part here. The summary sentence is this one. Studies show that blah, blah, blah. A comparative sentence or, similarity sentence is this one. It aligns with these other authors. A sentence that pokes at a weakness is this one. However, it's relying on self-reported data. This one contrasts between 2 different authors. And this one's kind of the linking or concluding sentence in the section. But you don't have to use, you don't have to sort of make all of your paragraphs in your lit review look like that, but it's a good sort of framework to internalize and to aim for. We want to situate our comments. We want to summarize articles. We want to compare them with others. We want to highlight limitations. We want to contrast them with others and sort of summarize and link back. It's a good little framework. Other useful tools that I think you might appreciate are the Manchester Academic Phrase Bank. So let's say you're writing a literature review and you want to talk about, or let's say any part of your thesis. You're looking for language. For example, you're doing a results section. Go there and you'll find little chunks of language that you can modify or sort of use mindfully in your writing. So in this case, there's language here for highlighting or identifying other people's research paper. You can say, in this study, they said blah, blah, blah. These are little chunks for how you might compare or contrast other people's research. So you can say these people contrast with those people. So that shows differences, and this one shows similarities. These people in the same way found, etc. And there's little chunks for how to generalize findings of research. One drawback is, one limitation is, etc. So yeah, get onto the Manchester Academic Phrase Bank. Whatever you're trying to do, whichever part of your writing you're in, there are useful chunks of language that you can use there. I also recommend that you read as many other theses as you can, or as many other literature reviews as you can. If you want to find any CDU thesis, scan on that. See how other people in your discipline and field have done it, and try to emulate that, or try to do it better than that. There's also a rabbit search. This is for more advanced users. So when you're looking for sources, you can put your source into this machine and it will show you every article that informed that source. It will also show you similar articles to that source, and it will show you every article that is a product of or that cited that source. Very useful for doing sort of extensive literature review. You probably won't need this in your, if you're doing sort of entry-level lit review like what you're doing, but it's there for those who are interested. There's a template on CDU's library website that asks you a series of questions, and you answer in that box, and then when you finish, it'll kind of make a lit review structure for you, or it'll kind of make an organization for you. You could get some benefit from that. You can also download these matrix or spreadsheet templates that can help you collect data. Or if you're good in Excel, you can probably just make one of those yourself. But if you want something to start with, download the template from there, or the matrix for there. The only difference between a spreadsheet and a matrix is the direction. So in this case, the reference is on the left side, and then we go through a series of columns. But in a matrix, the themes or the topics are on the left side, and you go through a series of sources. So whichever suits you the most, go ahead, but you can download the template there. I'd also like to plug some of CDU's support resources. You can access our study skills site at any time for assignment help. There's a vast resource of materials there. If you haven't looked at your subject guides, the librarians have put together a bunch of readings and resources that are related to your subject. Check that out. And if you haven't seen the referencing guide, the appropriate referencing guide for the style that you're using, go and do that. We also have appointments. You can see a librarian that can help with referencing or sources or publishing and research. You can see a language and learning advisor that can help with assignments or English or writing. And you can see a peer who has done the same subject as you and is volunteering their time to help. So I hope you take advantage of some of the library resources. And if you've got any comments or questions about this session, hit me up here. I encourage you to leave some feedback, because we're always trying to make our workshops a little bit better. Yeah, in conclusion, I hope this helps, ladies and gentlemen. Best of luck with your searching and with your literature review. And if you want to talk more about it or get more help, come and see me or one of the other teams in the library. We're always here for you. Peace.